Stand by. Is this thing on?
Yes, Dan.
Oh, hello.
You're listening to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
This just in.
Breaking news to report.
We are live.
Old newscasters
Can we just say former?
Sure. Former newscasters reunite behind the mic after more than 20 years.
Old news is good news.
Stay tuned. We have a broadcasting legend on the podcast today, and I'm not exaggerating. The Wisconsin Broadcasting Association named meteorologist Bob Lindmeier a local broadcasting legend in 2024. He is fresh into retirement after 45 years at WKOW-TV. Here to tell us more about his career and his life is the one, the only, Bob Lindmeier.
Hey,
Welcome.
Hello, Bob.
hello, Dan and Carrie. Nice to be here.
So nice to have you. It's amazing that you have lasted at one station for all of these years. I mean, you were at the station when we were there in the late 90s. You were chief meteorologist. You were a big deal then. You became an even bigger deal throughout the years. And I understand you've retired maybe a few times, but maybe this one's going to stick.
Yeah, there's that's what I get from people all the time. Are you really retired for sure?
Yeah.
Right.
I never did completely retire. About 5 years ago, I went part-time, vacation fill-in, but I was contracted for 40 days a year. So not that much. That's like
Yeah.
3 times a month that I'd be working. And so I was doing that, but then John Ziegler, the previous chief, left last year in the summer, and they said, "Hey, Bob, our new chief won't start till January 1st. Can you fill in for these next 6 months full time?" And so I did that. So I was full time for those 6 months. And then this year, or the last year, I was back to my normal part-time gig. So people, they saw me full time, they saw me part-time. Sometimes I wasn't on for a month because of vacation. So, but that's kind of the background there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I was going to ask you, Bob, you're retiring for real this time from doing the weather on TV, but you're really not retiring because you're going to stay pretty busy. It sounds like you're pretty into the whole, the climate change and talking about that quite a bit. So tell us a little bit about that. We can get more into it later, but I just want a brief thumbnail right now.
Sure. I really got into it about 7 years ago. And I was keeping track of what climate scientists were saying, as most meteorologists do. And I was getting more and more concerned as the years went on, but I didn't see the same amount of, from the general public, the same concern that I had. So I decided, well, why don't I use my position to go out and tell people about climate change and let them know my concerns about how this is a very dangerous situation that we're in. And that's how it all came about. So I've been giving talks. I've done it on air to a certain extent, but most of it's been face-to-face talking with groups. I have a slideshow presentation that I give, and I've given that a couple hundred times now in the last 7 years or so. I've been talking to all kinds of groups. So yes, that part of my life will continue. I'm very passionate about it. My 2 big passions are golf and climate change education.
So what are the things that you share when you're giving presentations? What are the biggest things that scare you as a meteorologist when you give your talks?
I break up my talk into 3 areas. First of all, I talk about the science and how climate change, there's no dispute in the climate science world that it's happening. It's only in the political world where there's a perception of discord and disagreement, but there's not. So I get into that. I really emphasize climate scientists are overwhelmingly agree that climate change is happening and that it's human caused. And I talk about global warming and how the whole effect of greenhouse warming happens. And then I get into the local effects. One thing I've learned is you can talk all you want about climate change impacts across other parts of the world, but what really resonates with people is when you tell them what's happening where you live. And I give that. I talk about how in Wisconsin, our average annual temperature has risen faster than the worldwide average. And we are seeing the impacts of that warming here, especially in extreme rainfall events and the like. And then but after giving that, and when people hear that, they're kind of like, oh my goodness, now what? I go into solutions. And I talk about how there are politically viable solutions, scientifically viable solutions that are out there, and and discuss that. So by the time I've done my talk is a good solid 45 minutes, and I throw a lot at people, but they have a pretty good understanding of what's happening locally, why it's happening, and what we can do about it, and what they can do about it.
Do you think regenerative, I can never say that word,
Regenerative?
regenerative, please help me.
Regenerative, yeah.
I got you. The
Regenerative.
farming.
Farming, yes.
Yes. Blah, 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 blah. Farming. I interrupt this broadcast to say regenerative farming.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
There are many different areas of that we can go into that will help the cause and help mitigate global warming. And yeah, in farming, it has to do with no-till farming. Farmers are learning that you don't have to every fall when you take your crops out, till up the ground and overturn it and expose the soil to the air. Because when you do that, that's what releases methane gases and other gases into the atmosphere. If you do no-till, then you just keep the ground basically unbroken, and you can reseed the next year. So that's one of many things. But yes, that is one.
Well, maybe someday I'll be able to pronounce that word.
Bobby talked about, it's a political issue many times, but when you talk to people face to face, do you find people are a little bit more receptive and you make more headway in that kind of more intimate setting?
I do. Yeah. It's not so impersonal. They're seeing me, they're seeing my passion. I'm stressing how I'm just telling you what climate scientists are saying. This is not my opinion. I'm just the messenger here. And that does help a lot. I do tend to speak to the choir quite a bit. People that ask me to talk generally believe in climate change. And so that's, part of it. But even for those that I believe in it, I'm always trying, my goal is to get them to be more motivated about it. And in that motivation, try to do something about it. And just try to move the needle forward, because it's everybody. We need everybody on board to really tackle this formidable goal that we're trying to achieve, and that is getting rid of fossil fuels. And it's not easy. It's a tough goal.
When you're like a lot of us, I mean, I think you have three grandchildren now, and
Yes.
you think about the future and you think what's going to happen for them. So I think that's something we all, no matter where we fall, something we need to listen to and at least come up with some solutions on a a global plane, really. So thanks for doing that. I appreciate
Oh
it.
yeah, and that's my main motivation. When I see my three grandkids who are 5, 7, and 10, I think about, well, what's the world going to be like for them in 50 years, 20, 30 years? And the trajectory is not the one that we need our world to be on right now. We've got to actually sacrifice a little bit, but it's for them and for making their world as livable as our world has been. I mean, we've lived in a fantastic era, but that's changing. It's been changing, especially in the last 20 years.
So let's go back to the beginning of your career. You were a student at UW-Madison, right, in meteorology. Can you tell us about your time in school? What led you to want to be a meteorologist?
Sure. I'm from Minnesota. I grew up in St. Cloud. And when I was in high school, I was thinking, I've always had interest in aviation. I do to this day. I was thinking I'd be an aeronautical engineer. I wanted to design airplanes and the like. And so I went into St. Cloud State College right there in town. thinking I might want to go that direction, but I quickly found out the math involved in engineering, I just, it wasn't for me. So I went into college not really knowing what I wanted to do, but I happened to take a 100 level class in meteorology. The teacher is really good, and that sparked me. That taking that one class is what determined my career path. I decided this is what I want to do. I want to get a major in meteorology. But I've quickly found out back then, this is back in the 70s, no college in Minnesota offered the degree. So I started looking around, and there's UW-Madison, and hey, there's reciprocity agreement. And it made
Right.
kind of a no-brainer for me to come to UW. And so I finished my last 2 years, 1977 to 79 at UW in the core courses of my major, and received my bachelor's of science degree back in 1979.
And did you first go to work for Weather Central before you were working for WKOW?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I graduated my degree, I had no plans to do TV. I thought I would be a behind the scenes meteorologist, like 95% of meteorologists are. Only a small percentage of us are broadcast meteorologists. And so that was my plan. But back then, the job market was pretty tight, and I was having a hard time trying to find a job with like a private forecasting company. So I was just at the UW working part-time research assistant and looking at the job posting board. That's what you did back then. There was no internet.
Yeah.
There was
What's on
papers.
the job posting board? And there was this position for a TV meteorologist up in Wausau, at WSAU-TV. Up until that time, I had no plans to do TV. I took nothing preparatory in my life to prepare me for doing broadcast television at all. But I needed a job. I had a baby by that time. My first had been born, so I was like, "Oh, I'll take it. I need something." That's how I got into my TV career, is out of desperation more than anything, needing a job. I went up there, but it wasn't a very good situation for me. I had no guidance. There's no one there to show me the ropes, to help teach me how to do this job, which I had no idea how to do.
So were you the only weather person, the only meteorologist there at that point, or?
Yeah, there was another meteorologist, but we're in opposite shifts.
Got it.
And so we just never had any time to spend together and help me out. So I had to kind of figure things out on my own. Didn't go so well. Yeah, I was really nervous. You guys remember how this was when you first do TV. There's definitely
yeah,
nervous aspect to it. I was super nervous. And I had this problem trying to translate weather at a level that people can understand what you're talking about. Tell a weather story. I was used to speaking to other meteorologists. And so I had this adjustment as well as to conversing with my audience. So between the nervousness and just not being able to tell the story, after a couple months, they said, "Bob, this isn't working out." So I was actually fired from my first job up in Wausau after a couple of months on the job.
And here you are 40-some years later.
Good.
Right.
I wish there was a tape from back then.
Me too.
I never did get a recording of that. Yeah, it'd have been funny. It'd have been just hilarious to watch.
But you took that rejection and you didn't quit. I mean, you kept going.
I did. By the time about 4 months into it, 5 months, when they finally got my replacement, by then I was starting to get the hang of it a little bit. But they already had decided to move on. But I decided, I think I can do this kind of work. I just need another chance.
So where did you go from there then?
I went to Weather Central. So I started work with Terry Kelly back on January 1st, 1980. And Weather Central is a private forecast company. And all kinds of clients that pay for specialized weather information. It can be a canning company. It can be agricultural. A lot of radio stations. We had about 45 radio stations back then that we served every day. And
Wow.
that's where I cut my teeth, really. Um, I didn't have to worry about a TV camera looking at me. I was telling a weather story verbally. And
Mm.
I got that part of it down. I figured out how do you convey the weather to your listener, or eventually to your viewer. And then with time, I started filling in at WKOW-TV because Weather Central, this private forecast company, one of their clients was WKOW-TV. And the on-air people were provided to the station. That's why it was called 27 Weather Central back in the day.
Right. Right.
And
Was Terry still on the air then?
he was, when I
He was.
started,
Okay.
he
Yeah.
was on the air.
Okay.
We still hadn't got into computer weather graphics. Matter of fact, well, that's a whole different story on how we present on TV. And we can touch on that. But
Yeah.
I started doing fill-in work like on weekends primarily. And I just remember I was still super nervous for quite a
Mhm.
while. But with time, I started figuring it out. And so during the 1980s, I eventually was able to get the weekend position. I did weekday mornings for a while, to the point where in 1989, it took me like 10 years to figure this out. But in 1989, I had the experience that was needed to become the chief meteorologist. When back then it was Brian Albrecht that decided to move
Hmm.
on, and I took the role. So that's kind of my career path that I took to, and yeah, I stayed here. I've been at the station all along. A lot of that has to do with Weather Central
Mhm.
Right.
and wearing that hat, being part of eventually in the ownership of Weather Central. Financially, that provided me um, the security I needed. So I didn't have to move up market size, which, as you well know, is the way you normally um, make more money in this business. I didn't have to do
Yeah.
because of my association with Weather Central.
Yeah, that is a really unique feature that Weather Central was housed for so long. They're not there anymore, right? They've gone elsewhere.
Correct. Yeah, Weather Central was actually sold. I got into the ownership of the company, got some sweat equity with time, and wore a lot of hats besides doing TV weather with the company, because we had graphic systems that we were selling. That was the big thing with Weather
Mm.
Central, was
Hmm.
developing, marketing, and selling these TV weather computers,
Hmm.
which were literally invented by Terry Kelly and
Hmm.
associates back in 1980. So I was involved in that aspect of helping to sell the computer systems along with doing my normal on-air work. Um, and so I did that until Weather Central was sold to actually, it would have been the Weather Channel eventually.
Hmm.
It was sold to back, it's been about 10 years. So Weather Central's been no more since the last 10 years. When that happened, then I became a full-time WKOW employee. It was no longer
Oh.
27 Weather Central. I was
Hmm.
part of the WKOW, yeah, employee
Even
group.
though all those years, a lot of people thought that's what you were anyway, but you knew
Yeah.
differently, obviously. But I want to go
Yeah.
back to 1980 when you started, and in
Mhm.
1979 even. And so before all of those fancy computer graphics
Hmm.
that we're so used to now with, weather forecasts and all the radars and everything else you can get everywhere, were you still using, what were you using to kind of tell the story of the weather forecast back at that time?
Yeah, people came up with all kinds of really inventive ways to try to tell the weather story with some kind of weather map.
Yeah.
Some, I know one person had a big glass plate with the outline of the United States, and he drew behind the plate backwards so
Oh,
that it showed up the right way on this metal plate. He put his H's and L's and wind arrows and the like. And that's the way he presented the weather. For
Hmm.
me, when I was at WSAU up in Wausau, they had a really two big maps, one of Wisconsin and one of the United States, glass plate on top of the map. And then what we would do is I had ink markers that you could erase, erasable ink markers. And I would put my highs and lows and try to do a weather map, put temperatures on those two maps. And that's the way
Yeah.
I did the weather, back then. When I got to Weather
I-
Central and with working with Terry Kelly, he had developed a really cool way of presenting the weather, and that he had these 8x11 uh, pieces of paper, thick paper, and we had the United States on one, the Midwest on one, Wisconsin on another, and we would use press on cellophane. We used ink markers again, press on highs and lows.
Hmm.
They were literally works of art that we would make. Um, and yeah, matter of fact, Terry Kelly makes fun of it in the video that I think you guys saw, my 40-year video, that I
Yeah.
would not stay within the lines when I was
Yes.
actually, I was very good at it. I was say, Terry, that's not true. But that's when we made the maps. And so you have the map, and then you'd have a TV camera shoot that 8x11 piece of paper, and then using chroma key, that would be your background video, and you would be in front of that and tell the weather story.
So how much time were you spending on putting together that? It sounds like an art project to me. Like,
Yeah.
that's a
It
nightmare
was.
to me. How much
Yes,
time were you
totally.
spending on that? And then how much time on your actual forecast?
Well, your routine was, first thing you did when you got in, if you're doing the afternoon to evening shift, first thing you did was prepare your forecast.
Yeah.
And we did our radios, but then we would also at the same time start preparing the weather show. Terry Kelly at that time was so busy on the business side that he didn't have time to do the actual preparation. So he left it up to the weather gnomes like me. We're down the totem pole in terms of seniority to make the maps. But I can remember many times we were upstairs in Weather Central, the studio's downstairs. And I would hear Terry would say, Bob, where's my maps? I'm gonna be on soon. So you're scrambling to get them done and run them downstairs and put them up on the board. It was kind of a high pressure environment. Yeah, you had to trade off, making them look as great as possible, but you had to get them done in time too. So that was the way. There were many ways to present the weather before computers, but that's the way we did it.
When you would go in for the day and you said, you'd have to prepare your forecast, like
Mhm.
what would that entail? Did you go to, some equivalent to AP and see what they were saying, or would you just, how did you get your weather forecast?
Yeah, we did our own forecasting. The computer models were in use by then. The very first ones called LFM. I remember that, limited fine mesh computer models. And so the model would make its forecasts. It would give us maps. We would get numeric code that you could read, that the computer model's telling you what it thinks the weather is going to do. And so we had that assistance. We had computer model information to help us. The satellite maps were very crude at that time. They were printed out on paper, but the resolution was not good at all. And just the amount of information we had, like when you plotted, part of it, one of the first things you did when you went in is you plotted a Midwest weather map. Each airport location was on the map, and you'd have a code from that airport location of what its current weather was. So you'd plot it on each of these airport locations, and then you'd analyze it, and you'd figure out where your isobars are, your highs and lows, your cold fronts and warm fronts. So you'd create a weather map based on basically a bunch of numbers that were in front of you. And that's the way we did our forecasts. I mean, it hasn't changed that much in terms that we still use computer models. They're just so much more refined
Yeah.
than they were back then. But yeah, I was in the age at least when computer models were starting to be used. Now that started in the 1970s. So yeah.
Well, I remember reading about, you said the first computer, generated graphics and things like that were done with a 1980 Apple computer.
Mhm.
And I remember, I mean, when I was in high school, that was like the first computers we used too, and we were still, using ones and zeros and things like that to try and do programming. So
Little
how
Fortran
that,
back then.
yeah, and it all moved so quickly, it seems like then, like through the 80s. So you kind of rode that wave right along with it, it seems like.
What was really cool was, and it was back then, the two first PCs that made it to the market were the Commodore and the Apple IIc, the
Yep.
Apple IIc computer. Terry Kelly had the vision to see that this basic PC, even though it's could barely do anything, but you could make weather graphics with it. And so he brought in some computer programmers from UW, and he formed this company called Color Graphics back then. And he developed the first on-air weather graphic system using this Apple IIc. And I remember when we first debuted it, it was like a big H for a high, a big L for a low. It was very jagged. It kind of looked like Pong or something, very, very crude games back
Great
then.
game.
Yeah, yeah. And it would just kind of jag along, moving. And I remember saying, man, let's go back to our beautiful works of art that are an 8 by 11 piece of paper. They look a lot better than this.
Yeah.
He saw the vision, he knew where it was going. But what was really cool was we were like the world leader in developing these television weather graphic systems. And the Madison market was kind of like the beta test site.
Mm-hmm.
So when something new was developed, we put it on the air. So our viewers over the years, when they saw these weather graphics, were seeing cutting edge graphics that would eventually make their way all around the world. And yeah, it was that way for many, many years.
That's so cool. We were talking with Kevin Craig about Weather Central when he was a
Okay.
podcast guest. Yeah, and we were saying that when we would visit Weather Central, we just felt like we were walking into NASA or something. It's like we'd
Yeah.
walk up the stairs and we'd be like, "Oh my gosh, we're at the mothership." It was just like a spectacle.
Yeah, there
And
was
there
a
would be
lot of
Bob in his
technology, a
chair.
lot of
Yeah,
very smart people were in that
very,
company
very.
developing. And
People don't
yeah,
realize this, but Bob would sit at the top like Captain Kirk in a chair and he'd swing around and
yeah, that back then we had a set that looked like
yeah,
the Star Trek set. And
Yeah,
it
that
really
was,
did.
it was a combined thing. It was a weather
totally.
set, but it was also a working environment. That's where we
Hmm.
prepared our forecasts for clients outside of WKOW. They were all done from that set.
When I changed my hair, Kevin Craig told me that the meteorologist department at Weather Central did not approve. They didn't like it at all. So it
Really?
yeah, they didn't go for it. So I had to work on changing it back.
Oh, oh
Well, that's
my
par for the course though, Carrie, because when you did the news back, and probably is still that way, they never complained about like if you made a mistake, it was always like, why did you choose that tie today? Or why is your hair combed that way, right, Bob?
Oh, I just felt really sorry for the ladies because they got it a lot harder and a lot tougher than the guys, in terms of
Right.
how they looked on air.
Well, I'll tell you I got there in 93, and it was pretty clear at that point already that Weather Central was I'll say Cadillac, now it's the Tesla or whatever. It was the top of the line weather forecasting service and computer graphics service in the world, it seemed like at that point. And we were very aware of that. At Channel 27 at the time. So it was almost, there was a sense of awe when you would go into Weather Central. And it was always very refreshing that all of you people over there working there were so very down to earth. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I just kind of grew up in it,
Right.
80s and 90s. So I kind of lost that perspective of how it could be kind of awe-inspiring to see. But
Yeah.
I can understand why you'd feel that
Over
way.
the years, you had a lot of promotions that people recognized you, like giving away the umbrellas, or you said later you were giving away money, your 4-degree guarantee. Can you talk
Mhm.
about some of the shtick that, some of the things that went along with doing TV?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of that, especially in the earlier days. But I made a decision early when I became chief in '89 that I wanted to some way owe up to my previous day's forecast.
Mm.
So I just started doing that. When I gave that day's forecast, I also looked back to the previous day and said, well, this is how I did. Um, but then Jill Genter, our promotions director, said, hey, why don't we make this where people can get something if you're wrong? So that's where the 4-degree guarantee came from. I don't think we originated it. I think there were some other stations doing it at the time, but we started the 4-degree guarantee a long time ago. This is back. You probably remember it when you were on the air.
Yeah,
we were there
definitely,
then.
for
Yep.
sure.
Yeah. At first, what we were giving away was umbrellas for the longest time.
Yep.
We gave away all kinds of different things, though. I think there were sweatshirts involved, but mainly umbrellas for a long, long time. And I've got like 10 different umbrellas that I've hung onto each iteration, each version of what we did. Eventually, it went over to money, but and the 4-degree guarantee is something that we've had all this time, and it's kind of our thing.
Well, Bob,
That's
one
impressive.
promotion I remember that you were involved in was something when you first were doing weather forecasting and the meteorologist, you wore glasses. And
Oh
when
yeah.
I came there, I think it was the first couple of years I was there, you were one of the first people I remember who had LASIK surgery done or laser surgery. And that was a big deal. I remember kind of go through that again. That was like a story on air and everything, wasn't it?
Yes, I do remember that now.
Right. I had Coke bottle glasses. I mean, my vision was not good. And so, yeah, I was
Right there
intrigued
with
by
you.
LASIK. I'm sorry?
Right there with you. Yeah, I
Oh,
had those
yeah.
too.
So I was sick and tired of when I came in during the winter, all fogged up glasses. I played basketball back then. My glasses kept getting knocked off my face. So I decided to look into it, and I was able to arrange, this is with TLC
That's it.
back then. Bob, we're going to give you LASIK free of charge. And this is like a $5,000 operation,
Yeah.
but let's do it on air. Do you remember this?
I do.
I
I
remember
totally
watching
remember
it.
it. Yes.
With Wendy Warren.
Yes.
So Wendy Warren, the news anchor
Medical
back
Minute.
then, yeah, was in there, and so they saw the whole process, saw my eye and all that as they were using the laser on me. So yeah, that was a way to get free promotion. It was mutually beneficial. Everybody won on that one.
Yeah. Plus, you calmed a lot of people's nerves who might have been thinking about doing that at that point too, to see that you did it and it worked.
Yeah, I'm sure the TLC made out just fine after that.
Yeah,
In
right.
terms of getting people. But I do remember when I had it done, there were so many people that didn't like it. They wanted Bob with glasses. Because I looked a lot different when I went with no glasses, and people had a hard time just getting used to me without glasses. Part of it too. To this day, some people come up to me, Bob, I like you better in your glasses. It's like, okay.
Like,
people never hold back, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like 25 years ago now. Time flies.
Yeah.
And you're still glasses free?
I am
Good for you.
glasses free.
Good for you. Yeah.
What were some of the most memorable weather stories that you covered over the years?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there were a lot of them. I'd say the
I'll
first
be
one was
back.
probably, what's that? Oh yeah, okay.
He's got to let in the contractor.
Yeah, the contractors might be okay. The first one I remember is Barneveld, the Barneveld tornado. Back, I think it was '83 when that struck. I just remember how I was on shift earlier that day. The tornado struck Barneveld right around midnight. We knew that there was the potential of severe weather earlier that day, but we weren't expecting anything like what happened. I remember I was on shift, but I left. My shift was done before the severe weather really got going later that evening. But just that whole experience with Barneveld and seeing the aftermath was something that I'll never forget. It was one of the biggest, most powerful tornadoes ever to strike to this day.
Wow.
And I've been talking to people Even up to last year, people were telling me their stories. I've had people tell me how their house was literally wiped away. Um, but they managed to survive, unlike
Hmm.
some that did not. So Barneville's a big one. On the tornado theme, the Stoughton tornado was one that I tracked, and I remember, yeah, tracking it on radar and getting a call in from one of our Weather Central people who were storm chasing, and they said they saw a stovepipe tornado. A stovepipe is a tornado that is not angled to the ground. It is literally like a stovepipe,
Oh,
which
whoa.
is indicating a big tornado.
Yeah.
When they're not funnel cloud shaped, but if they're
Hmm.
stonepipe shaped. Um, so I knew, oh my goodness, we have a big tornado on the ground.
Hmm.
Uh, but I just remember tracking that. I made it on ABC World News Tonight at that.
Really?
Yeah, they did a brief snippet of me on air. My only time making it on
Hmm.
national TV with that event. One other I'll just mention is most of the time I've not been able to storm chase. I was always the one indoors tracking on radar, and
Hmm.
there would be others that could do the storm chase. But we decided one year, and this was back in the late 90s, I believe. So we decided to go storm chasing, but we decided to go down to the deep south, to Texas, Oklahoma,
Whoa.
and see what we could find. So they set aside a week that we would do this. Now, we had no idea whether there'd be severe weather during that week or not.
Hmm.
It turns out there was. And so we had the storm chase truck. It was this yellow truck. You might have remembered the yellow storm chase truck.
Yes.
We brought the satellite truck with us and another vehicle. So it was a three vehicle uh, entourage of that we went down to the border between Texas and Oklahoma and waited to see what would happen. Well, as it turns out, the next day there was a major tornado outbreak,
Whoa.
and I was now I'm not an experienced storm chaser by any means, but we we got reports of where the tornadoes were happening, and so we went chasing. And I remember we would be going through towns that had just been hit. We were
Hmm.
just behind the tornadoes, and there's power lines down, houses were wiped out.
Hmm.
And we got to a point where we were on this causeway. So it was a road with like swampy areas all around it. It was just a one-way road. And we had stopped because the weather looked pretty dangerous at that point.
Hmm.
We saw a funnel cloud in front of us. We look behind, there's a funnel cloud behind us. And
Oh.
we're like, oh, what do we do? We're in the middle of this swarm of funnel clouds. Now, none of those particular funnel clouds touched down, but it was still a pretty frightening thing to be right in the middle of a severe weather situation like that.
Was that the scariest weather moment you've actually experienced?
I think so. That evening, we decided to interview a person whose house had been wiped out. So
Mm.
he's willing to be interviewed. But there was still thunderstorms around and there's still lightning around. And so the satellite mast went up and I did this interview, but we had lightning flashing not that far away. It was not we shouldn't have done that. That in hindsight was too dangerous. But so yeah, and it was again satellite fed back to our viewers, so it was a live broadcast
Hmm.
from northern Texas that I did. It's the only time in my life I did something like that. Um, One other story though. A lot of times we do remotes. And so I do the weather in different locations. I mean,
Mhm.
might remember the Friday night newscasts and whatever. We'd go, especially to football games.
Yep,
Mhm.
I remember
And
that.
I did a lot of football games just on my own too. But yeah, I would remote from all over the place. And one place I remoted from was Devil's Lake. And the way we did it was Jim Buntrock, who I know you remember,
Of course, yeah.
Bunty.
he decided to get on a canoe and paddle out in the middle of the lake. He had a little antenna with him. So we're in the middle of the lake. He had a camera and antenna. He pointed the antenna at the truck, the microwave truck that was up on top of the bluff that sent the signal back to the station. So I was paddling on Devil's Lake doing a live weathercast. That's
cool.
but that was back in the days when you had a large engineering department too. You
Yeah,
could do
he
Right.
was an amazing mad scientist. I mean, he would just like, you could see the light bulb go boom, and he'd go,
Yeah.
Eureka! And then he'd go running off and magically put something together. I mean, he was truly a genius.
Yeah,
Is.
speaking of legends,
Yeah, speaking of.
Right.
Bunty, as we called him, he was
Yes,
a legend too.
totally.
And he usually took you about 5 minutes to catch up to him where he was thinking, You'd be like, what?
What will you miss the most about not being involved with the station in the weather department?
The people, the friendships that I developed over the years, a lot of good friends. At the station right now, especially Amber Noggle, Jill Genter. I mean, we just go back a long ways. So they're good friends. I mean, it's not like our friendships have ended. We'll all continue to be friends with them and they'll see them. But, being in the station and being in the green room. So for your listeners that don't know, we have a makeup room. We call it our green room. I don't know if it was green. But we had a big mirror and we didn't have makeup artists. We had to do our own makeup, so we go in there and do our makeup. But that's when you talked with people and caught up, how are the kids and the like. So I'll miss that banter, of being in the green room with sports anchors and the news anchors. I'll miss that. I'll miss the funnest thing for me in my job was actually just doing the on-air, getting in front of the green wall and doing my trade, doing my craft and trying to do it to the best of my ability. I mean, when I did a really good weather show, that was very satisfying for me. Yeah, there's that. And also just the severe weather, tracking severe weather. And when you did a good job at that was really satisfying because you might have saved lives and doing a great job with tracking tornadoes and giving people enough advance warning to get out of the way.
Is it going to be hard for you when there is a big weather event and you're sitting at home, or is it going to be hard for you to not like get in the car and run over to the station?
Not really.
Yeah.
I've been there, done that. I've done 45 years of severe weather tracking. So I've had my fill, one way to putting it.
Good for you.
Will there still be some threat of that? Oh, sure. I mean, that's why meteorologists become meteorologists. Almost all of us is because of severe weather. I mean, we love severe weather. We don't love the effects that it has sometimes on people
I do.
and the like, but just that whole idea of severe weather is what fascinates us. So, and I'll always have that. Yeah, I'll always track severe weather. I'll just do it from my home.
You can tell your wife about it instead of all of the viewers, right?
Exactly.
Tell the grandkids to get in the basement.
Yeah, and I've done that a few times.
Yeah. You were in the same fantasy football league as my husband for many, many years. You and Jay Wilson had a team, right?
Oh, yeah, we were one of the first fantasy football league teams in the country. This was back in the 80s when we first started. Yeah, so that was I've been in a fantasy football league every year since. So I've been in fantasy leagues for the last 40 years. And yeah, that's always a big part of my life. My son is actually the commissioner of one of the leagues that I'm in. But yeah, that's always been a fun thing for me.
Yeah, I believe you and Jay, the name of your team was Old Mary Guys, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we were the old married guys back then. Oh, yeah.
Now they're all old married guys.
Yeah. Older married guys.
Yeah.
Hey, so you've been in Wisconsin for a long time, but are you still a Vikings fan then?
No, actually, when I decided
You're
to
not.
transfer to the University of Wisconsin, and when I realized I'd be sticking around, I decided to change my allegiance to give myself competition with my brothers. I have three brothers, and they're
Ah,
yeah, they're diehard Vikings fans. So, but I wanted to get kind of a rivalry thing going. So this is back in the 90s. I didn't jump on the bandwagon. That's back when the Packers were not very good. This is before Brett Favre and all that. But now, yeah, like my son Brandon, who's in his early 40s now, he has my three grandkids. Um, but yeah, we have a lot of texting going on back and forth when the Vikings and the Packers are playing. Yeah.
So
I bet.
over the years, 45 years in Madison, I mean, people really grew to love you, respect you. They trusted you and turned to you when they'd look out their window and see bad things happening. How do you build trust as a meteorologist?
Yeah, just doing the job day in and day out, coming in, giving it your best effort, and let letting the chips fall where they may. But a big part of it is severe weather, though. You
Hmm.
can do a month's worth of great on-air weathercasts during the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock newscasts. But if you are not on during that severe weather event, then people are not going to be, they'll drift away because there have been a lot of good meteorologists on air here, including Gary Canulti, among others, um, that are good at this job too. So if you're going to keep them watching you have to not only tell a good weather story every day and try to make it interesting, but when it comes to severe weather, you better be on and do a good job. That's the way you keep viewers. That and just the fact when you're on for so long, people just kind of get used to you. And I've had where three generations of families, that they've watched me, and so longevity definitely plays a big part in this.
Do you see that as a privilege, Bob? I mean, having been able to do this for that long, and then also just the way people approach you in public. Do you see that as a privilege?
Yes, I do. When you're doing the job, as you well know, when you're in front of a camera, it's not like you have an audience that's back there,
Hmm.
applauding you or saying boo or whatever. You're kind of in this your own space. So a lot of times you don't
Hmm.
realize how people are really come to depend upon you, and you become part of their family. You're in their living rooms, and where it really started to hit me was actually when I posted it on Facebook that I was retiring and seeing all the different responses, hundreds of responses from people um, saying how they love me and how they really will miss me and the like. That's when it really sunk in
Hmm.
is how much you can impact viewers. And when you get that kind of response, yeah, you see it sometimes. You go to like art fair or whatever, and people will come up to your booth. That's a pretty small sampling.
Hmm.
That's where it really hit me as to, yeah, you've had a significant effect on people's lives, and I consider it a privilege and an honor to have been able to do that.
Speaking of Facebook, did you make that transition to social media as being part of your job? Did you embrace that, or was that a challenging part?
It was challenging. I had a hard time with the social media part, and quite
Hmm.
frankly, it's one reason it was like, this is time to get out of the business because it's changed so much. I mean, I was in it to do TV weather broadcasts,
Hmm.
and when social media became such a big part of our jobs, and I've found out that that just wasn't my thing. And even now, I mean, I have a Facebook, but I'm on it minimally. My
Hmm.
social media presence is pretty limited, but that's where things are going now.
Right.
The world has changed so much in the TV broadcast, in the television broadcast meteorologist world. And it was kind of moving past me to a certain degree. And so it was good timing. I mean, my timing, I couldn't have asked for it to be better, as to when I decided to retire. It was time, and I felt good about it.
Good.
So people may not see you on Facebook, but they will see you on the golf courses and maybe at a climate talk in the future.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely. You'll see me occasionally on Facebook. I'll still
Yeah.
keep my account going, but I'm not a daily Facebook poster. Okay, I just do significant big events in my
Yep.
life, and I'll still continue to do those. But yeah, I'm an avid golfer. I'm almost an everyday golfer. I can
Ooh.
look out my office window right here and see the golf course. I've been very
Oh,
fortunate.
that's nice.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can walk to the clubhouse, and my cart's waiting with my golf clubs, and away I go. My wife loves to golf, so that's always been a big part of my life. So that will definitely continue, and doing climate change presentations. I'll continue to do those as well. That'll be a big part of my life. You don't have my bobblehead.
I don't. I think I need one. Do you have one nearby you could show us?
Yeah,
there is a
right over
Bob
there is-
Lindmeier bobblehead. That's right.
Yeah.
Talk about a legend. Okay, how did this come to be?
That's when you know you've made it, right?
Yeah,
You have a
seriously.
bobblehead.
Jill Genter, our promotions director, came up with it. At the ballpark here in Madison, they do bobblehead nights for Maynard the duck. They do theme bobbleheads a lot during the summer, but they decided to do one for me. This was back like 3-4 years ago now. It was part of the 40th anniversary. When, they did a big kind of celebration for me. And there were like 1,000 bobblehead boxes that I handed out as people were walking into the ballpark that day.
That's so awesome.
Well, a quick look out on eBay, they're worth $795. No.
That's a good question.
Pretty cool. I love it.
Yeah. So you've made it when you have a bobblehead. That's all.
Absolutely.
Seriously.
So outside of, doing some more golfing as often as possible, doing your speaking engagements, anything else you're really looking forward to doing now in retirement, Bob?
Traveling more, definitely.
Yeah.
I always planned a home base here, a large degree because of my grandkids, but I plan to get down south during the winter a fair amount.
And
Where you
golf.
can golf all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I have simulator golf during the winter, so it's not like I can't get my golf in, and I do. But yeah, there'll be more traveling. I would like to find something else. I'm not sure what it is, but I want to add something else to my to-do list. But we'll see. Well, I'm only a week into full-time retirement, and it wasn't a big step because I was part-time anyway, so I went part-time to full-time retirement. It's going to be interesting to see where life leads me now that I'm into retirement.
Very cool. I always like to ask people about their bloopers. Are there some bloopers that still maybe haunt you or make you laugh after 45 years? I know, you were so smooth.
Oh, yes, there certainly are. I'll give two. One didn't actually happen to me. We had a meteorologist named Paul Hager. He was before me. He was like late 70s into the early 80s. Again, this is not me, but this happened to him. He went on the air not feeling well. He had the flu, but he could not find anybody to fill in for him. But he was pretty nauseous, and he told
I know where this is going.
Producer ahead of time, if I say, let's go to break prematurely during my weathercast, please do, because it means I need to literally throw up. And lo and behold, that happened. He was in his weathercast. He felt himself get really nauseous. He said, I'll be back with more details after this. They cut to the commercial, and he just threw up right there. The problem was they didn't cut off his audio.
Oh, it's
People
the worst part. That's the worst. So now everyone in
Oh
Madison is
no.
gagging.
Yeah,
Everyone at home's like,
okay, and the other one is when John Stofflet used to work with us, and
Yes.
yeah.
John
Podcast guest.
oh, excellent. Yeah, he has this, talk about a legend. John's one too. But we used to work together doing the morning shows, and John, as you know, is kind of a jokester to a certain degree. He likes to have fun.
Mhm.
And this one time during the morning newscast, it was during the short GMA cut-in, so it wasn't a long weathercast or anything. But he had finished his news segment, went to commercial break, and I was next to do my short little weathercast. He decided just to start clapping, and he started clapping, going Bob, 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 Bob. I'm looking at you, John. What are you doing? But he just kept going, Bob, Bob. And and then they were starting to count me down, 5, 4. And he kept going right up to the last second. He clapped, and then he stopped. I started laughing. I went into uncontrollable laughter. And when I
Oh.
started laughing, of course, John started laughing. The cameraman started laughing. The floor crew director started laughing. We got this group laugh thing going. And I didn't say a single word during that whole weathercast. I just laughed. I mean, tears are coming down from my eyes. I was just laughing as hard as you can possibly imagine for that whole thing. I can imagine, people are eating their cereal.
They're like,
Yeah.
what's going
Right.
on?
What is happening over there?
What's the forecast, Bob?
I know. There's a hilarious forecast going on right now. Funny
Yeah,
weather.
so we went to commercial break after my weather segment was done. I'm thinking, oh God, am I gonna get fired? And we did get people calling in, quite a few.
I was going to say, how many
Oh,
people
Yeah.
called in?
there were a lot. I don't know how many, but there were a lot. But they all were saying the same thing. Bob, you made my day. You made me laugh. Kind of put our whole business in perspective a little bit.
Yeah, really.
Right.
You
Nobody
can,
minds a good laugh.
yeah. So, yeah, that would have made TV bloopers and practical jokes. But it happened a little bit later. They had those on.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
it
Well,
didn't.
that's awesome.
That would have been viral. I know that's one of my favorite things, like watching Saturday Night Live when they start to crack up, because then it's like you can't help but crack up with them, and then everybody's laughing, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, it's live. So
Mm-hmm.
people sometimes don't realize we're live, and when things happen, you just have to go with the flow.
Yep.
Well, and you did it, and Carrie and I mean, some of the things we remember the most are those moments where things went terribly wrong, and you remember them, and they're a lot funnier now. At the
Yeah,
time, that was funny too, but sometimes those things that just go off the rails are the things you remember forever. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
you didn't have a lot of those, but it was great to get to watch you from out here all of these years, Bob.
Well, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was a great ride. I just consider myself so blessed and fortunate to have had the career I do, and looking forward to where things go from here. I'm in a good spot in my life, so I'm right now pretty content.
Any advice for
Good.
people going into meteorology?
It's a different world. It's a different world. As you know, the TV business has changed.
Mm-hmm.
The segment of the pie of the viewing public that watches on-air newscasts is pretty small now. They get it through social media. They get it through their phones. So the money isn't there like it used to be. It makes it challenging in this business. But if you go into it realizing what this world really is like, you can still make it in this business. But it's different than the world that I grew up in a big way. Quite frankly, there's a lot of broadcast TV meteorologists, on-air TV meteorologists that are getting out of the business. They're looking at other ways to make money as a meteorologist, because the TV business has changed, and to me, quite frankly, not for the better. but there's still opportunity there, no doubt about it. But if for someone that's thinking, if there's a young person out there thinking about this is what I want to do, just know what you're getting into. We have the young lady that's replacing me. She's amazing, and she's actually going to the UW yet. She's going to be on air and still going to school for her last semester. But I know she's going to have a great career. If you're talented and hardworking, as any profession, but you can still make it in this business too.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we wish you the best in retirement.
Well, thank you, Carrie and Dan, and just great to see you after all these years. And you haven't changed. It looks like you're
right. None of us have.
Right.
We say that to everybody. None of us have.
So, not a lick.
This has been great, Bob. Thanks for talking with
Yes.
us on Old News with Dan and Carrie, and we look forward to seeing you out on the links.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
That's old news for now.
Join us next time.